Yo, what's going on, y'all? I know it's been a couple of days since I posted anything, but that has more to do with the fact that I have issues with equipment, which seems to be like a running theme for me. I wanted to talk about the fights this weekend because I did get an opportunity to sit down and watch them all. First and foremost, Izzy, great, spectacular knockout. You know, great knockout. And I'm talking about, of course, UFC for a little bit. But I wanted to talk about the Charlos. And Jamel Charlo is the king of the 154-pound division. Make no mistake about it. When you look at everything that he has had to go up against in that division and everyone he's had to fight and who he's had to prove himself against, he's the king of the division. He's unified 3 titles now. So it makes perfect sense for us to think that he is the king of the division. You know, there's no real reason why anybody should think that Jermell Charlo has anything more of himself to prove, especially when you look at the fact that he's been on the end of a bad decision against Harrison, won the rematch and knocked him out in the rematch, and then proceeded to follow it up by taking taking a couple of titles off Rosario. So now you have, what's next for, Jamel Charlo. He'll have, an opportunity against Julian Williams. You got, Jared Hurd in the division. And then, of course, you've got, Patrick Teixeira, who's barbecue chicken for Jamel. Let's just be real about it. But, of course, Teixeira might have to fight Brian Castano, who I believe is the mandatory for him. So if he does fight Brian Castano, I think Castano will beat him, and I think Charlo beats Castano. But for Jamel, I think a good stay busy fight for him will probably be fighting somebody like an Erislandy Lara, for instance, or even like doing a title defense against somebody like Jared Hurd. That would be a good fight, or even a J Rock. But Jamel, you got to go see Jamel to get to for the division. There's no hiding around Jamel Charlo. Really, really, really good performance. Definitely now I'd consider Jamel to be somewhere borderline in my top 5 pound for pound list. Especially with the fact that there's not many fighters that are active right now, and not many guys have win as good as this within the last year in terms of the calendar. So yeah, Jamel did really good. And then, of course, you got Jamal Charlo, who beat Sergey Derevchenko, and he beat him really well. He beat him really, really well. It was a good performance by Jamal Charlo. We had probably never seen Sergey Derevchenko look as much out of his depth in terms of fighting a top-tier opponent, when he fought Jamal Charlo. Derevchenko looked pretty good in a lot of spots versus Danny Jacobs, and Danny Jacobs kind of just stepped on the pace at the end of the fight. I thought Derevchenko beat Gennady Golovkin, and I don't think there's anything that you can do to convince me otherwise. So when I look at this Charlo fight, this is an opportunity for people to compare Charlo versus a performance by Gennady Golovkin and Danny Jacobs against a guy who both have fought relatively within the last 2 years. And he went in there and he looked good. He looked convincing. He made a lot of really good adjustments against a guy who has to get on the inside and fight him. His jab was very good. The way that he would counter Derevchenko coming on the inside was definitely something that you needed to do against a fighter like Sergey Derevchenko, something that Golovkin failed to do, in my opinion, especially towards the later rounds when they fought. And that's something that Danny Jacobs started to do a little bit more towards the later parts of the fight when he fought Sergey Derevchenko. But you saw Charlo do it from just about the beginning to the end of the fight. And for me, when I look at middleweight is such a weird division because everything is there to make the division really good, but nobody seems to want to seize, the prize of the division. You got Canelo, who doesn't know who he fights and what division he fights because him and his network and his promoter can't even get a list of fucking fighters that they will approve for him to fight. You got Gennady Golovkin, who seemingly we don't know what the fuck he's doing. He's just waiting on Canelo. And you got Charlo, who you could tell like he wants to fight these guys, but he's not gonna kiss their ass in order to do it. And you can't really be mad at him for it. You know, he wants to get these fights, and he would have fought both Canelo and Gennady Golovkin right now. He would have had both those guys on his resume, if not for the WBC and their bullshit. Let's just be honest about that. When the WBC chose to go out of their way and not force Golovkin to fight Charlo when Charlo was the mandatory for the title then switches hands to Canelo. Then you come out with this bullshit franchise title so that Canelo does not have to fight Jamal Charlo. And as a fight fan, that gotta bother you because that's a good fight. So now you have a guy who's entering his prime, and these guys between Canelo and Gennady Golovkin, they're only getting older. You know, Canelo's going to be 31 soon. Gennady Golovkin is damn near almost hitting 40. And by the time that if he gets the opportunity to fight these guys, a lot of people are going to say these guys weren't at their best. And they're not going to look at, you know, well, when they were at their best, you know, why didn't the fight take place? And then we got to get into this revolving argument about shit as far as like the business of boxing. So I think for Jamal Charlo, he should keep beating everybody in front of him, because at some point, Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin are going to have to face the pressure of having to fight him, especially as he continues to peak even higher than what he's doing right now. I think somebody like Jamal Charlo should fight like a Danny Jacobs. That would be a great fight next, him versus Danny Jacobs. And you could put that fight, you know, just about anywhere given, you know, if we're going to be able to move into a position to where we can have people in the stands. And if it's a situation in which they wait for COVID to be a lot more manageable, where you have a vaccine and people can attend fights, that's a perfect fight for Brooklyn. You could put that fight in Brooklyn. But those are my thoughts. I do think that the Charlos really looked good this weekend. I don't know what's the official pay-per-view buy rate. I think for the quality of the card, it was worth the pay-per-view. For the name value, it wasn't really something that jumps off the screen in terms of who wanted to pay for a pay-per-view, but I hope it be successful, because it means that these guys get to be successful. They make money in the sport.